they believe this whole world is just a play of shadows. And so they sometimes, we were going to try to do it, but it didn't really work out. But we were going to try to create a screen and with the light behind it and then show on there. And so they act out the dramas as a little entertainment piece. But the teaching is they believe that all this world is a shadow. Now, we all have a visible, mortal life and an invisible, immortal life. Two aspects to our one life, visible and invisible. And some have become conscious, somewhat conscious, of their mortal life. And those ones realize that what they thought was life, the mortal side, is just a shadow of their real life, which is invisible. So 2,400 years ago, Plato taught this very point in his cave analogy. He wrote that we live in a shadow world where we confuse the shadows with reality. We confuse the personality with the inner self. The false ego of the personality is casting this shadow because it stands in the way of the light of the inner self. And the shadow eclipses that light, the egotism eclipses that light and casts the shadow on the unequal ground of time, space, and place. The problem is our attention is fascinated with the shadow. So we're not looking back to see where the shadow is coming from. But turning away from the shadow and facing the light that's casting the shadow, we lose awareness of the shadow altogether. Whether it's Catholicism, Buddhism, Hinduism, or any ism, egoism is the obstacle for all. And the 5 golden keys are just another way to overcome the egoism, to live free from it, to live free in life. If we can do that, then we let this inner light shine through us from the inside. Then with the material light and with the light shining in us, there'll be no darkness for us. Nothing will obscure the light. Now in the Bible there's a very mysterious statement that says, "For we were born yesterday and know nothing, because our days on earth are a shadow." Our days on earth are a shadow. What does that mean? Well, to have a shadow, we need 3 things. We need a light source, something that blocks the light, and then something for the shadow to fall upon. So when we look at all the temporary forms of life around us, as we've been telling here, they're not life itself, they're a shadow of that life. All the entire earth and all the wonderful forms of life are not the source. They are the shadows of the source. So even the highest human intelligence can't really understand much about this phenomenon. But it doesn't matter what you call it or what you call it, life itself or God, nothing can escape its power. That's what the term almightiness does. Nothing can escape its wisdom. That's the omniscience. And just by observing, we can see anything from a one-cell organism to a giant whale or the body of a human being. There's some life that comes into that. And then the bodies die, and then where does the life go? We don't know where it comes from or where it goes. So mystics in all times and places have come to this same conclusion, that nothing can exist unless there's something behind it. Nothing comes from nothing. Now, as Plato gave us one of the best analogies of all this. Can everybody see it okay? It's a little... So, 380 BC, he presents this cave analogy in his book, The Republic. And he attributes it to his mentor, Socrates. And he gives this visualization. He's asking us to imagine a dark cave underground and prisoners who are chained to the wall, who can only look at the wall of the cave. And behind them there's this dividing wall, and they have what he called the puppeteers, who are moving different images around. Behind them is a fire. So this firelight hits the images and makes a shadow on the wall. Now, since these guys can't turn around, this is the only reality they know. And we would consider the most intelligent one of these guys would be able to discern something about what these shapes are. But he wouldn't really see the real shapes behind it, only the shadows of the shapes. So the firelights casting objects, and these guys are moving around, so they're seeing this movement of the shadow, and they take that real life. And behind this fire is a difficult passage up out of the cave to the real sunlight. For the prisoners, this is the true reality. And their condition is very much like ours. We're here in the material world, and we're not seeing the source of all this life. We're only seeing really the shadows of the life, not the true forms. But we could say, in our system, we would say they were projected archetypal ideas found in the noetic state. Now these objects these guys are holding up represent the archetypal ideas. The body forms that first appear in the noetic world, then the psychic world, and finally manifesting more densely as the three-dimensional forms we know on Earth. And this is exactly the condition we find ourselves. We can only see this. We can't see the pure archetypal ideas. Now in Plato's story comes the first stage of liberation. Somebody frees this prisoner. And so for the first time he can turn around and see the light that these shadows are being cast from. But what happens? He's blinded. He can't stand it. It's just too painful. So what's he going to do? He's going to turn away. Yeah. He may even run away. And he will definitely at first think the shadows are more real than the blinding light he can't understand. And it's the same for us. When we turn our gaze away from all this material play, the shadow play of the material world, we can find what's behind it. So in the process of him seeing the light, he gets pain to see the true reality, because he's not used to looking at the true reality. He's used to looking at the shadows. And it's the same with us. When we have our illusions and we turn and see the light of truth that shatter the illusion, there's great pain in it for us. It could be a relationship with a person you thought was a certain way, and then you come to find out they're not that way at all, and that causes us pain, tears, sometimes sorrow. Pain, of course, is emotional or mental pain. And that how much pain we feel when our illusions break has a direct proportional, it's directly proportional to the amount of attachment we had to the illusion. It's the same with the prisoner. He sees the light, he sees the truth, but he wants to run back to the shadow because it's more comfortable. It's the same thing for us. We may, if you've ever had this experience where you start to come out and you see the truth, boy, that illusion felt much more comfortable. I'm so much more used to that illusion. But now we come to the second stage of liberation in Plato's story. So now, the prisoner that's been freed, after a while, it's going to take him a while, but his eyes going to get used to the idea of the light, and pretty soon, first he has to look away, but pretty soon he can see the light, and now he sees that this, what he thought was real, this is the real thing for him. That's the real thing for him, not the shadows that have been cast from it. Then comes the second stage of liberation, where someone takes him out of the cave, right? But they have to force him, because as he starts to come out of the cave, the light's super bright, causes him a lot of pain. What would be the response? Pain, blindness, rage at the person who was showing him the light. He would be mad at that guy who's showing him the light that's creating his pain. And isn't that what's happening on Earth?
It's the Matrix movie. It's the Matrix movie.
Yeah. And Socrates, for example, revealed more truth than anyone knew at that time. And the jury of 500 of his fellow Greeks accused him of corrupting the minds of the youth of Athens and not following the multi-god system they had. So they sentenced him to death by drinking poison. Pharaoh Akhenaten in Egypt in 1380 AD, or BC, had the same experience. He showed them that, no, there's one true God, and he abandoned the 42 gods of the Egyptian religion. And he called the god Atan, the one true God. He was poisoned 9 different times by his enemies, who supported the old 42 god system. And the final poisoning that killed him happened in Thebes when Akhenaten was at his adopted son, Tutankhamun, well, we call him Tutankhamun, but he was Tutankhaten at that time, his birthday celebration. And they poisoned him there, and he went back to his palace and died. And of course, you know, after Socrates, Christ did the same kind of thing. And they crucified him. Today, instead of poison or crucifixion, they use weapons to try to kill people who show the light, discrediting them. That's all they can do now. They can't do the other old ways, which is good news. So it is, was, and will be a common reaction by the ignorantly malicious to try to destroy the one who stands up to reveal the truth. This guy would be fighting this guy totally, 100%, trying to lead him out of the cave. But it's preordained that we can't stay in illusions forever. We can't stay in the shadows of illusions forever. We have to return to the light. We will return to the light. And it doesn't matter how many incarnations it takes, we all will return. And so there is, was, and will always be those spiritually courageous people who try to show the others the light and risk everything in doing it. Daskalos was actually stabbed one time by black magicians who he was revealing their thing, and they came and stabbed him, not physically, but they materialized a dagger that stabbed him while he was asleep. Okay, so now our prisoner again is outside, he's outside in the full sunlight. And at first, again, it's just way too much. He must look away. He cannot uncover his eyes to understand the true reality that he's now in. But slowly, his eyes become adjusted to the light.
Daniel, just before you continue out of the cave, who represent or what represent these guys that are carrying the shadows? The ideas?
The archetypes.
It's they're the archetypal ideas. You could say it's the archangels if you want. He never really said on that.
And he said something about the fire, the light inside the cave.
Yeah, this is the psychonoetical light. That's because it's not the true light, the true super light, the noetic light. This is the psychonoetical light. And it's casting shadows. So now, think about this. He's now out here in the sunlight. His eyes finally got used to it. And he sees the trees and the mountains and the water. Now, think what he would think compared to the knowledge he has now compared to this. He would think this is nothing but the other prisoners' understanding were deep in illusion, ignorance, because he now sees the truth. In a similar way, an enlightened person, when they look at the material man or woman and sees what they think is reality, it feels the same way to them. They're in the shadows of illusion. So we can go further and compare this light of the fire in the cave with the light of the sun. Both are called light, but there's a great difference in quality and quantity of that light. And it's, what can you say? You say both use the word light, but what can you say about the difference between a smoky fire and a light of the thermonuclear sun? How can you compare those? Or we could say it's the difference between the two kinds of light is the difference between the quality of the self-consciousness of the personality and the self-consciousness of the inner self. In this way, we could say it's the quality of the expression of the divine flame within the human being is giving the different states of consciousness. incarnated beings on Earth can only understand material light that they see through their eyes. But as we know, there's infrared, ultraviolet, X-ray, gamma ray. Those are all light. But just because they don't register in our eyes, we call it darkness.
But they're all around us all the time, right?
What's that?
Like they're always there. Like if we could, like have the origin to see them. I mean, we just can't see them with the eyes, but there's so many different types of waves around us right now.
That's exactly right. But with the super senses, you can see these other.
Yeah, that's what my dad told me. That's like you would be amazed if you would actually see those things. Like Richard Feynman even talked about that stuff. It's just because our eyes cannot see them. It's not that it's not all there. The microwaves and this and that and X-ray and it's just all is about rays. It's just like how do you say it? It's just actually like I can't find the word right now. It doesn't matter. It's just like we can't just see them with our eyes.
Yeah. I mean, if we could, just think when you walk in a city, I mean, you're walking through dozens of Wi-Fis. If you could see all those radiation, the microwaves and all that stuff, wouldn't that be totally confusion?
Radio waves.
Radio waves.
It's a grace of God that we just have the eyes to see all this beauty.
Yeah. So until we're ready. And those guys who can see that, they have the ability to stop seeing it, because otherwise it would drive you crazy if you saw it all the time. It's a very narrow band of light that we call light, band of radiations. But these guys that can see the higher frequencies, not only can they see it like that, but they can see the etheric light, the psychical light, and the noetical light, and ultimately the noetic light. Now this is what scientists call the super light, what religion calls the everlasting light, the eternal light. Daskalos called it the indistinguishable light. So compared to those kinds of light, our material sun is like the smoky campfire, really. But now we can use this analogy between the light of the fire and the sun in another way. What's the difference between the common love of people on earth and unselfish love? Between selfish love and unselfish love, it's the same. The light from a campfire gives you some light, but it gives smoke too, and if that smoke gets in your eyes, it gives you pain and you cry. Selfish love so often ends up with having some degrees of pain and tears of sorrow, very, very often. So we can compare those two in that same way. Because egoistic love sooner or later gives pain. Now between the material world, he's trying to give this analogy of how this works. So Plato's calling it the world of the pure ideas, which is the same as Daskalos saying the noetic state. Same thing. And Plato called it the world of the pure ideas. We call them archetypal ideas, which are pure ideas. And each of the archetypal ideas contains the laws, causes, and principles for that expression of the archetypal idea. For example, you have the archetype of a tree, but you also have two sub-archetypes. You have the evergreens and the deciduous trees, the ones that lose their leaves. So then you break that down. And so with the evergreens, you have the cedars, the firs. So there's sub-archetypes and sub-archetypes all the way down to the individual tree, each individual tree. Now, it's important to understand, we're using the word idea, archetypal idea, and form. And these are not the same. We have to understand the difference. The word idea comes from the Greek word idea, which literally means image. That gives us some idea about the thing in the Bible that says, let us create man in our image. So Plato's ideas represent the first principle by which is the true source of all the different bodily forms coming here. And it's the same with Daskalos' teaching, exactly the same thing. The archetypal ideas are the real, and everything else has been derived from those. In Plato's thing, as in Daskalos, these ideas are invisible. But their embodiment in forms are visible in the natural world. So the forms are only shadows cast by these ideas. Now, of course, there's all the archetypal ideas. The human idea, the archetypal human idea, is the highest for sure. But try to understand that when we look at these forms on earth, we're not seeing the idea. We're only seeing the shadow of the idea.
And yeah, don't we all go through the idea of the human like before we become a soul?